Alrighty, everybody. Had to be done. This hated Patriot. Yes, I'm going to express my goddamn 2 cents on the whole Zimmerman Trayvon Martin thing. Figured it was one of the most pertinent things to talk about. In the sense of it definitely seems like everybody is caught up in the story. And that's going to be the first thing I'm going to underscore about my conversation I'm going to have with you right now, is that it's a story. Hold on a second. Too many distractions. Had to turn off the idiot box. So, what we got going on here? We got, let's see, put my head more in the frame. Great. So, what do we got here? We've got a sensationalized murder that occurred. Now, it's a murder. It is a murder. But it's I guess the word would be a justifiable homicide is the question here, because there is no question apparently that George Zimmerman killed Trayvon Martin. The idea is that he killed him in self-defense. He had to kill him because his own life was in danger by the person that he killed. And that's kind of the nature of the human conflict in many respects. So the problem is that we've got a story here. Hold on a second. She's very fidgety today. What do you got to say for yourself? You're disrupting my camera flow, eh? Eh? Bad girl. Pow pow. Alright. Anyway. So, what we got going on here is we've got a story. We've got two stories, and then trying to find the happy middle of the truth. Which, you're never going to get if you're just working off of those two stories. You're talking about a story that was presented by lawyers in the prosecuting party, a story that was created by lawyers in the defending party, and a story being run on the media, which includes the interpretation of the stories of those two lawyers. Where in this do you think you are getting the truth? Think about it. So there you go. You're not. That's the answer. So, with that being said, everybody's reaction to this is entirely based on the story. So, what I am doing here is, I am talking about the story that has been presented. Because the story is based on, let's face reality, is that the reason why this story is a big deal is because this story is commonplace in the black community. And the whole story is designed as a race-baiting story, and they want to create the perception of injustice. And especially in the sense that the law is flawed, which, of course, this not only ties race into it, but it conveniently ties gun control into it, because, of course, the matter involved a gun, and the odds are is that Trayvon Martin would be alive today and well in that respect. And then we'd have a very, very different situation, which would also be probably a situation that never would have made the news. But because the minority in the confrontation has been forever silenced, there you go. And effectively, there were no witnesses. What you have, and one of the principal reasons why George Zimmerman is a free man, and why they didn't even want to press charges against him in the first place, is that he was on the phone the entire encounter with the police. Therefore, it would be incredibly embarrassing for the police if if George Zimmerman would have been convicted, because at the end of the day, they didn't press charges against him after the man was dead. And so therefore, but at the same time, I think that that's right, because this conflict wasn't between George Zimmerman and the police. It wasn't between George Zimmerman and the people of the state of Florida, if you will, which would be something that, your state attorney, district attorney, whatever your state has, and to prosecute you. That's up to the family, the next of kin of the injured party, to press those charges. And there should have been no reason why that chief of police or whatever for that police district or whatever that was supposed to arrest him, there was no reason why he should have been fired. It was all political pressure. Political pressure becomes a very, very strong force with a lot of these people, especially considering all of these police organizations are private, corrupt entities to begin with. Sometimes they do good. They're definitely doing good every time they're being the impartial peacekeeper between two other parties. That's when they're doing good. When they're actually answering a call of somebody who needs them. Somebody who is not a cop themselves. So, moving forward, what we have here is the story of a Jewish Peruvian man who has been labeled as white and then corrected to Hispanic, thus creating some sort of white Hispanic weirdness, which there is no white going on in him, other than a racism based on the fact that he's a fair-skinned Jewish Peruvian. I've made the joke that he's a Juvian. So laugh, if you will. Let us all laugh, because we're not the ones suffering here. So anyway, and so basically this guy is a member of the Neighborhood Watch, pretty much I think the leader of the Neighborhood Watch. And the Neighborhood Watch is anybody like you and me. And he goes and he made sure that he filed and properly with the police, saying, "Hey, I'm going to be a civilian, citizen patroller, performing the duty of keeping the neighborhood safe, to help flesh out keeping an eye on things where the police are not." And, you can also, I don't know to what extent George Zimmerman was exercising authority, but, you have a right to do things like citizens' arrests, et cetera, et cetera. So what happened is that you see a guy by himself, I guess his hood was up or something, meaning he had a interest in concealing his face. Either that or he just had an interest in keeping his head warm. One way or the other, unfortunately, there's a suspicion that comes with that, late at night, whether you like it or not. And you're a fool if you don't look at yourself and say, I might look a little suspicious like this. So, George Zimmerman pursues him as the only thing going on. He's a little concerned. And in the pursuit of Trayvon Martin, he is on the phone with the police the entire time, performing his duty in that capacity. Now, for whatever reason, there allegedly was a point where the cops said, "Dude, don't continue to follow him," but he did anyway, and he was there. The cops weren't, and so George felt a need to do so. He got close enough to create an altercation. Of course, if you are defending your freedoms, your right, your authority, you're going to say that they threw the first punch and that you were doing the just and honorable thing. And unfortunately, it's all hearsay because nobody was really there. All these claims about star witnesses, yada, 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 is nothing. It's all character. The entire trial was about character witnesses. It's like, how much can we make Trayvon Martin look like he deserved to die, which they can't do, which they can't prove any of that. And how much can you make it look like George Zimmerman was a hunter-killer of black youth? And there's no evidence of that either. It's all hearsay. It's unprovable. And there actually is plenty going on in the sense of George Zimmerman's community activity. It's what's presented on the news. Remember, this is all about the story, and unfortunately, that's what we're all arguing here. We're all arguing over the stories that these lawyers and the media have regurgitated on the masses to incite a strong, emotional, irrational response. Even if it's peaceful protest, it can still be irrational because the basis of your protest is being based entirely on your empathy for the image of the one who's dead, and it's tragic when somebody dies. But look, one way or the other, they got in a fight. The fight was strongly escalated. And this was, and maybe George Zimmerman could have said, listen, my name is George. I'm the neighborhood watch community person. I'm really concerned about you here walking around at night because there have been burglaries. I'm just checking up on you. It's my right because I live here too. And who knows? Maybe he said that in his own way. And one way or the other, Trayvon Martin decided to, as the story goes, this is the story that's been painted to us, decided to play the angry black man that basically didn't show George any respect. And, for whatever reason, it came to a fist fight. And with a lot of kicking and throwing down to the ground and everything else. And then allegedly Trayvon Martin threatened George's life while pounding his head into the ground. And it's obvious that George incurred some injuries. It's all over the video. There's no way he got scratches on the back of his head like that he self-inflicted. Alright? So, and I doubt he'd go out of his way to self-inflict wounds, considering he had been forthright on the phone with the police the whole time. And it's hard for me to believe that a guy who was on the phone with the police the whole time is the guilty party and would be thinking about trying to get away with murder. But then again, I suppose that might be what the loophole of the stand your ground law is. But then again, the way it seems to me is that the stand your ground law is just a reinforcement of your basic Second Amendment rights, which I guess is necessary considering all the other craptastic laws that we've thrown upon our already unconstitutional gun control laws, which is all based in commerce in reality, because it's all statutes. It's, there's no injured party. You can't arrest the guy or take away his property just because you pass the law that says so. The process of you owning that thing has to have actually created harm. That's how God's law works. That's how natural law works. So at any rate, the fight occurred. George Zimmerman was afraid for his life. He pulled the trigger. And I'd imagine if it weren't for the fact that George Zimmerman had probably been already through a greatly intensified fight, maybe he would have had enough forthright to shoot him in the shoulder first or something. But let's face reality. He was probably far too struggled, and he just had to shoot wherever he had his shot. Because you ain't got time for a clean shot when you're in hand-to-hand combat with somebody. Especially when you're already pinned down or had been pinned down and you're still right there and you're on top of each other. Alright, that's what it is without any of the social stigma. That's what the story that we're told is. Doesn't matter if the story's true or not, but that story is what's got people up in arms. Why? Because that's a reality for not just young black people, but anybody who's just young and just trying to hang out. And, the nightlife is very appealing, You want to go through your evening. You want to stay up late. When you're young, you don't need a hell of a lot of sleep. There could be things going on. Your friend's throwing a party or wants to watch a movie or something like that. Or you're just hungry, like Trayvon apparently was. All right? But at the same time, just because you don't like the fact that somebody in the neighborhood is just looking out, doesn't mean you got to get all attitude on the guy. Alright? I'm saying, I'm just based on the story. Let's just presume the whole story's a lie. Let's talk about the instances when this is real. Because that's what we're really talking about. Is the main reason why everybody's angry about that is because everybody knows somebody who's been harassed this way. But guess what? The other thing that's different is that usually they're not being harassed by a guy on the neighborhood watch. It's usually a cop. And part of this story is that George Zimmerman wanted to be a cop. He was a wannabe cop kind of situation. It makes me think of almost predictive programming because that movie came out, that Ben Stiller film, Neighborhood Watch, and then Jonah Hill's character was the wannabe cop of the four of them. So I thought that was pretty interesting that you've got that same dichotomy going on. And obviously, it would make sense if you want to have a movie about a team of guys that are going to be neighborhood watch. It would be a good written character to have the guy who aspires to be a police officer. And then what happens at the end of the movie? He earns the respect of his local police department and becomes one of them, as well as still being on the neighborhood watch. And that was a fun movie. But at any rate, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is that people are very, very angry, white and black alike, about how black people are treated, because that story is the kind of story that we're unfortunately and sadly all familiar with. Now, the other side of the problem is that once again, none of these things have jack shit to do with gun control. Gun control ain't going to help. You know, if Trayvon Martin had a gun, then we'd be in a different story. For one thing, whether you're a cop or not, if George Zimmerman's behavior was too assertive himself, was too aggressive himself, in the course of that fight, it could have been a gunfight where both of them were dead. Or it could have been flipped around. What if George Zimmerman, obeying a gun control law, trying to be neighborhood watch, was doing that? The person, whoever Trayvon Martin was the criminal who had his illegal gun. Who's shit out of luck now, huh? Then this wouldn't be on the news at all. Why? Because it would be your atypical, actual thug. You know, yes, the side on the right is still is painting. You know, like the side on the right that's painting George Zimmerman in one light is probably accurate. I don't know. Once again, it's all just a story. I don't really believe anything's accurate. But I also don't like what the right is saying, because it's racially charged, of saying that he was a thug. Listen, man, we've all been through the bullshit. And the stuff that they're basing his thuggishness on is all stuff that had... Did he have a criminal record prior? No, not really. He was getting a little bit in trouble at school, whatever. He's smoking some pot. Good for him. I smoke pot all the time. So go fuck yourself. That has nothing to do with shit. More, you know, and if Trayvon Martin was... I would have loved if the toxicology report said he was high. Because then that actually would have made it too complicated. Because it's like, hold on a minute. In reality, if Trayvon Martin was high, that means he should have been more chill. Therefore, it makes it harder to prove that Trayvon Martin was the fucking aggressor. Do you understand now? Do you understand how absurd this case got? And, you know, and this is what you're basing your desire to protest on. All right, I'm not saying don't protest. You know, when you really care that strongly about it, you know, freedom of speech is the right of every man. But at the same time, my freedom of speech is also telling you that you're being real dumb, because you're basing this on very, very, very limited resources of information. And you're letting your entire opinion be swayed that way, and it's dangerous. It's very, very dangerous on a social level, because you're going to invoke political changes and social changes in society that are not going to be healthy, because you're playing right into the Pied Piper's hands. The mainstream media is eating this up. This is what, you know, like when they see this happening, oh man, look at this news we created by creating this anger over this thing. Ah man, we got protests to work on. Woohoo. That's what you're doing. That's all that you're doing. It's horrid. You know, you're following Al Sharpton right into the pit of hell. Okay? So there you go. So, at the end of the day, cops work outside of their jurisdiction all the time. You can't just sit there and use your police power just because you have police power, because you don't like the way a situation looks, even though there is no crime being committed. In order for a crime to exist, there must be an injured party, or corpus delicti. I believe the Supreme Court ruling on that may have been Kent versus Dulles. I'm not sure. I don't have the paper in front of me. I probably should have prepared it. At any rate. And police power extends only to immediate threats to public safety and health, which is Michigan v. Duke, I think. So therefore, you have to be brave. You have to see past the threats and intimidation that are implied by the man with the gun in the uniform acting under color of law and the appearance of the authority of the state. And you have to stand up for yourself, and you have to be able to quote those things to the officer, look him dead in the eye, as the innocent person you know you are, and you have to tell him he has no jurisdiction over you because of those two reasons. This is especially important in driving situations because they're presuming statutory law, they're presuming commerce, they're presuming traffic. You're not driving, you're traveling. You are not in a car or a van or a motor vehicle, you're in your vessel. Traveling in a vessel is freedom. Driving a car is, or driving a motor vehicle is commerce, and therefore you're submitting to commerce jurisdiction. And that is why they're issuing you a bill. It doesn't matter if you ran that red light. Doesn't matter one iota. Why? Because there's nobody pressing charges against you except for the officer that saw you did it, and that's hearsay because there is no third party. You have to have a third party involved, who is the intermediary. I've recently been dealing with this, and I didn't know half as much as I did until after the fact, but yet I still have the ability to fight it because I've been handling the after the fact, the court side of it, for a while now, in which, it's funny enough, there is no court side of it yet, which doesn't make sense until you understand where I'm from. But at any rate, my whole point is that police jurisdiction. So, because if this was if the person involved in the incident, like George Zimmerman, was maybe a plainclothes police officer who then just throws out his badge or whatever, it would still feel exactly the same way. And you can't just throw a badge out and all of a sudden, boom, you're a police officer. You need to identify yourself as a police officer. You need to tell them to identify to you. You can't just throw a badge. The badge kind of gives you a chance to, because he's trying to say, I'm a police officer. But he needs to prove it. You got to ask for 3 forms of ID. You got to ask for photo ID. You got to make sure you get a good look at his badge, and you need a business card. He should have all 3 of those things. If he doesn't, if he's at least got 2 of them, then I suppose that works. But 3 of them is the ideal because then you can get a business card from him, so that way you can work off of that information. One way or the other, he needs to prove to you that he's a cop. If he's not a cop, then he's just an agent, and he's an agent for the statutory, the corporate side of things, his privateering aspect of it. These stupid quotas that we all know that they have to keep up. And it's extortion, and it's an extortion that we're allowing. And these are all the various things that build up the fear about a situation. So that is what is a reality for most people, is that it's what George Zimmerman did to Trayvon Martin, except it would have been somebody who's a cop, not just some private person walking down the street, whether recognized as part of a neighborhood watch or something or not. You understand? Because there's a lot of discrimination, there's a lot of racism, there's a lot of interest in processing a person through the system, and if they're poor and ignorant, they're going to go to jail, and that suits them just fine, because the reality is that they can then extract money for the system going into the bonds. They'll go into your bonds, and they can profit off of your bonds. It's sick. It's a form of slavery, in a very, very corrupt and indirect way. It's god awful, and it's they do it black people for the most part because they've intentionally uneducated them and put them in in social circles that aren't very helpful to them in the manners of legality and economy, and they've created very much this easy target. And as the general population as a whole gets worse and worse, and is more and more ignorant of the law and of the economy and of their rights, it's slowly bleeding into the white community as well, because there's far less people of wealth. Because beforehand, if you had money, if you were part of the community like that, you're typically left alone. Why? Because it wasn't much to bother. It wasn't much to bother with. They knew the cops knew these people could afford good lawyers anyway, and the whole 9 yards. And lawyers aren't really helping you anyway, because lawyers want you to go through the pleading system, and you never want to plead because you do not understand the charges. And that's not a lie. The charges can seem as simple to you as they possibly can, but at the end of the day, you're not a lawyer, and those laws were written in legalese. They're written in lawyer language. They are spells. They are spells cast to control you. That's what they are. And they create the construct of this reality of the government, the mind control, which is literally what government means in Latin. Anyway, at the end of the day, y'all just need to keep a cool head. And don't worry about justice for Trayvon. You weren't there. Worry about justice for you. Everybody needs to get together and talk about what's really wrong with your community. And think really hard, for those of you out there that are coming across this that have the perception of we need more gun control. And think about who you're submitting that power to. Because guess what? The more and more you pass gun control, the more and more you're saying cops should have guns and we should not. And the main reason why everybody's angry about this is because of how cops treat people. And maybe it would be okay for a lot more people to have a lot more guns. Just maybe. White and black alike. Poor and rich alike. Because I bet you $1 million we'd be a much more polite society. Well, thank you so much for listening. Please leave all your comments and hate mail below, so that way we can all yell and fight about it and have an interesting discussion. Thank you so much. I'll catch you guys on the flip side.